Larry Diamond is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, a professor of political science and sociology at Stanford University, and founding co-editor of the Journal of Democracy. He joins us for this edition of Now. Larry, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You just participated in a very interesting day here at the Wilson Center under the banner of Does Democracy Matter? And so I'll start with that question. It's somewhat stunning that we're at a point where we have to ask that question. What are the circumstances that make that somewhat appropriate?
Well, I think there's discouragement with the performance of democracy in a lot of the advanced democracies like the United States, and then the rollback of democracy all over the place. Its poor performance in Ukraine, its failure once again by military coup in Thailand, the growing robustness and self-confidence of China, Russia, so on, rapid development in authoritarian Ethiopia, and one could go on. And so a lot of people are saying, maybe it's just too hard, look at Iraq and Afghanistan, maybe it's just better to push that aside and just focus on development and security. But as I said, if you look at what people want, people on the ground, whether it's in Afghanistan or sub-Saharan Africa or Ukraine or growing parts of Asia, people want to be governed democratically. They want accountability. They want transparency. They want more political choice. They want protection for their human rights. And so if you ask, does it matter? It certainly matters to people who increasingly want popular sovereignty and freedom.
We've gone through a bit of soul searching and self-criticism and maybe thinking that we have damage the brand of democracy. Are we being too hard on ourselves, and is that limiting our ability to promote democracy?
I think we need to stop wallowing in self-pity, as a former president once said, and renew our confidence in our own convictions. But if we do that, I think honest reflection on our situation paired with that confidence in our values will inevitably lead us to be pretty self-critical. Just for analytical reasons, our democracy is clearly not functioning well. And every time we go through another budget crisis or have a petty and paralyzing deadlock in the Congress over an important piece of legislation or some kind of issue that needs to be addressed one way or another, it's demoralizing to all of us in the United States as citizens, and it's very damaging to our standing in the world and to the cause of democracy in the world. So we definitely need some very hard and creative thinking about how to invigorate our democratic institutions again, make them more functional, more able to forge working compromises, and less subject to polarization and nasty, petty politics of mutual destruction.
Well, elections are one thing and can be their own kind of craziness, but what happens between elections, governance, what do democracies need to deliver that they're not currently delivering to create stability, momentum, a positive image for democracy?
Well, the first thing in a lot of places around the world is free and fair elections. We shouldn't take that for granted. And even in the United States, if you look at the report of the Bipartisan Presidential Commission on Election Administration, co-chaired by the top two, the top Republican and the top Democratic election lawyers in the United States, we have serious problems with election administration in the United States, some of them technical and administrative that we need to attend to. And of course, in other places, elections are much worse. But beyond that, democracy needs to be able to craft some kind of policy response, which often means some kind of legislative response to the big challenges we face as a society. And for example, I'd say that includes now climate change, where we can't just keep kicking the can down the road. We need some kind of response that can mobilize a broad consensus in the country. More generally, I'd say one of the most basic functions of government is to pass a budget. And we just, if we want to have a functional democracy, which can also stimulate investor confidence, if we want to be respected in the world, We just can't keep going through this spectacle every couple years of the federal government approaching, a cliff of dysfunction and shutdown as a result of the inability of the different party caucuses in the House and Senate to be able to agree on a budget. We need a better process, and we need more willingness to compromise.
Final thought on Trendlines. When we look at some of the headlines, they're somewhat discouraging, if not completely discouraging. But for watchers of democracy and the health of democracy, and in this context specifically democracy promotion, what are some of the trend lines that maybe aren't leading as headlines currently that people need to be aware of?
Well, I'd say one trend line that's been very interesting is what's been happening with public opinion. So yes, there's been rollback and deterioration of democracy. There's been increasing innovation and cooperation among authoritarian regimes in closing democratic space. But as I said, if you look at public opinion, for example, there's been a regular public opinion survey in Africa called the Afrobarometer, and it shows pretty sophisticated understanding among the majority of Africans as to what democracy is, and strong demand for democracy. And so the governments in Africa are not going to be able to keep rolling back democratic freedoms and constitutional restraints without a popular reaction. That's an encouraging thing. And look what's happening in the streets of many societies. In Turkey, with the Gezi Park protests some months ago by young people who were fed up with the creeping authoritarianism of the ruling Justice and Development Party and its abuse of certain values and principles. In Hong Kong, very recently with the protests there. This is a harbinger of more to come. I think as a rise of the internet and the wired and extremely attentive nature of this new generation in many developing and emerging political systems, there's a desire for more freedom and more accountability and more rights to participate in the political process. This may not always need to be accommodated at any particular moment with democracy per se, but it certainly requires in these countries political reforms to move in a democratic direction and allow more democratic choice and freedom. And in a country that's had quite a bit of freedom, or a political system that's had quite a bit of freedom and electoral participation for a long time, and that was expecting democratic rights to choose their leaders in free and fair elections, a system like Hong Kong, I don't think democracy can be held at bay forever. And indeed, in China itself, I think we see rising complexity in the society, increasing autonomy of the mass media and the social media, and a growing social base that will permit and even demand more democratic freedom.
And those expectations just get greater. They don't decrease once they begin, correct?
I think that's right.
If you would like to hear Larry's keynote from the event that I referenced earlier, you can find that here at wilsoncenter.org under the Kennan Institute page. Lots more. There was a whole day of activity. Larry, thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah,
Terrific.
thank you.
Appreciate it.